So we're in your economy book and we're going into chapter 4, the laws of supply and demand. So it's really important. This chapter actually is probably one of the foundational chapters in your book. So it's important that you know about what these laws of supply and demand, especially if you are going into business or if you're a consumer. So we're going to be talking about the value of goods, marginal utility and value, onto basic law of demand and basic law of supply. And then go on in our next video, we're going to continue. We'll have to probably do this in 2 videos. So the value of goods is the first thing we're going to discuss, the value of goods here. So there's 2 fundamental concepts I hope you know, and that's supply is one and demand is the other. And entire economic structures have collapsed because men fail to understand the relationship between supply and demand. So we need to have a healthy respect to ensure that our free market remains productive and beneficial for all producers and consumers. So the laws of supply and demand are so important. And these laws are not enforced by governments. They're economic laws that of supply and demand that are general precepts and very important to know. And they operate naturally in any economy. So whatever the economy would be, just supply and demand are important. Mankind has known about these laws for many centuries, but not until about the 19th and 20th centuries did economists put them into concise laws and realized what these laws were. So we're going to talk about first let me go on to the next page here, talk about the law. We're going to first talk about the law of demand, going into the law of demand. So let's see, let's go back here. I think that I didn't go over the whole thing about here we go at the bottom. So the definition and recall of demand. So demand means the amount of goods that is bought at a certain price under certain conditions. Demand is that you really demand to buy something. That's the demand. The relationship between some goods, and the amount that people are willing to buy of that goods. So it's not merely that I like to have it, but you might want a speedboat, it says, but unless you have the money to buy your speedboat, then you're not really part of demand. So demand is that you want to buy it and you have the money to buy it. A millionaire may have a lot of money and could buy a speedboat, but they may have no desire to buy the speedboat. So you have to have the desire. The demand is you have to have the desire, and you also have to have the money to buy the speedboat, right? The desire and the money has to go together, and that is the demand. So now let's talk about what supply. The supply. So when you think of you think of the value of goods, you think of supply. So supply is the quantity of a good for sale at a certain price under certain conditions. It's a relationship between a good's price and the amount that the producers are willing to provide for consumers at that price. So consumers may demand a good, but suppliers need to supply it. If it's not there, they can't buy it, right? So supply is what the supplies are on at hand. And maybe a supplier may be unwilling to provide that supply, so then the demands are not fulfilled. So supply is very important. So let's go here and we talk about more about value. So I like what it says up here. It says, but even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are more valuable than many sparrows. And that's in Luke 12. So we are very much value. I love that when we were talking about value. So value, goods that have a value have 2 different types of values. First of all, value in use. So what is value in use? Well, value directly is related to the benefits the benefits their owners receive. So what is beneficial to one person may not be beneficial to another. It might be useless. So value in use means that, oh man, I'm going to buy that because I'm going to really use that, right? So that's the value in use. Then there's the value in exchange. An exchange is that you want to buy something so you can sell it to somebody else and make a profit. That's the difference. Two things, you're buying something so you can use it, or that you can exchange it or sell it to somebody, resale something. So those are the two different types, okay? And they give the example down here. Let's go down here, an example of the Dedham farmer. And you can read this, but I'll just tell you a little bit about it. So in 1670, a Boston farmer, he cut a few pines for his logs and thought he could sell some of it. And basically, he thought, well, maybe I'll take some of these logs. I have an excess of them, and I'll take them to the docks in Boston and see if I can exchange them for something. When he got to the docks, he found there was a merchant there at the docks, and he had 50 barrels of molasses. And he didn't have the space to store the molasses, and he needed those logs, or those pieces, the wood that came in, because he thought he could build a warehouse for his stocks. So the two struck a bargain, right? And they swapped goods, and both, it was beneficial. Both believed that they had done very well, and so they had an exchange between the two, voluntary exchange, and it would not take place unless they both believed that they would benefit. So that is kind of, when you look at the example of value, you can see both of them had value, right? So the value became important. So the value in exchange, what a particular good is worth in exchange from some other good. This is called trading value, right? You take one, and it does not really vary according to individual preferences. It basically says, let's say, what the traffic will bear. So what does it mean, what the traffic will bear? What the traffic will bear is a way, let's go on to the next page and I'll show you. Here it says, need a bigger warehouse. Well, I've got a deal for you. I like that picture. So let's go in here. So the benefit for let's go on to. We're talking about the value. So what the traffic will bear, and what the traffic will bear means the amount which both buyers and sellers will agree. So how much will you give me for this, the seller says, and the buyer says, how much do you want for these goods? How much money do you want? How much do you want for these goods? So the average is called the value of exchange for that kind of good. Today, value is expressed in money, right? So a price is the amount of money that a buyer or seller has for a particular item. In a free market, both of them are, important in a free market, right? When we talk about exchange. So the supply and the value in exchange, the value exchange varies from one day to the next depending on the supply and the current demand of the object, right? So in a free market, both are satisfied. You call this, basically, in a free market, would be the market price. Market price here. So when we talk about the word price, we mean the amount of money that a buyer will sell a particular item. And then we go down to a market price. Let's go on to the next page, tell us about the market price. The market price, here we have market price, are those prices at which goods can be sold in the open market with many potential sellers and buyers. So you have an open market, you have a market price, and then you have the regular price. So you can tell the difference. So the scarcer the good happens to be, the more people are willing to pay for it because it's pretty scarce to buy it, right? So the value of exchange, it depends. It could be 20 shillings, for the molasses, and then 15 shillings for the pine boards, as it happened there. It depends on what money situation as they put the price, on the price being that amount of money that a buyer or payer sells for a particular item. So that's kind of going on. So that's going on. Let's go on to the next section. So now you kind of know about supply and demand, what we're talking about. So let's go on to the next section here. This is called marginal utility and value. So what is that? We'll find out here. So marginal utility and value, it says the value of an object does not remain the same even for an individual. So like the Dedham farmer, and that he wanted 1 barrel of molasses. But what if the merchant wanted to give him 50 barrels? Well, he didn't really need 50 barrels. He just needed a barrel of molasses for himself, right? So the 50 barrels would not have the utility value for it. The same for the boards for the merchant. So what if he wanted to give him a whole shipload of boards? Well, the merchant would say, no, I don't need a shipload. I just need enough to build, a little, storehouse here. So another example here, like boxes of chocolates, okay? Picture here too, boxes of chocolates. So a friend gives you a box of chocolates and you think, wow, yum, and you can devour them down, that box of chocolate. But what if they give you 10 boxes, or they want you to buy 10 boxes the next day? You're not so eager to buy 10 boxes because you're kind of full of those chocolates, right? So chocolates don't really mean unless you were going to sell them or give them to someone, of course. The more we have of a good, the less value and the additional units would be. So if you're going to buy just one item, then you decide, well, I'm going to have to buy about 10 or 15 items. The 10 or 15 items are going to cost less to provide because you're buying more, is what they're saying. So this is called diminishing marginal utility. Right here is written. Diminishing marginal utility. And that's as one supply of a specific good or service increases, the satisfaction derived from each additional unit tends to decrease. So that's what we're talking about. As you get more, your satisfaction has decreased. So you get more, you're going to pay less per box or per sale of items. So you basically, you possess 10 pounds of chocolate, you're not much inclined to want more chocolate, right? This is your diminishing marginal value. Important that you know, diminishing marginal value. So another definition here too is marginal utility. Marginal utility is the amount of satisfaction that results from 1 unit increase of product, and it tends to be smaller with each unit. So it's the same way. One is diminishing, and the other is the amount of satisfaction. And one is the diminishing value. This is the diminishing marginal utility, and the marginal utility is the amount of satisfaction that results from 1 unit of increase. And it tends to become smaller. If you already possess 10 pounds of chocolates, you would not probably be much inclined to buy another pound for your personal satisfaction. For you, any additional supply of chocolates has diminished. So the marginal utility. So you notice that marginal utility is that definition. Diminishing means it's getting less and less. So all you do is put a diminishing in front of that and you have marginal utility, meaning the same thing. So example here. This example is quite a deal with a burger. Example here. So this is, I'll never guess what I bought for your anniversary, Mary Lou. More chocolates, flour. Oh, we bought her flowers and she already has all these flowers. So it'd be a diminishing value if she already had a bunch of flowers, or to buy her more flowers, let's say. But here's what the example here has to do with cheeseburgers. So Matt, he went to the Burger Palace and he ordered 4 cheeseburgers and he devoured 3 of them down. We had 4 of them, and so he thought, this is, okay. So 4 was okay. But then they came in and they said, you can have cheeseburgers for $0.25. So he bought another half dozen, 6 more. And so the 2 of them bought 6 more, so he bought 3 more. And he ate one very slowly. You can imagine he's getting full. The 9th burger he couldn't even eat, so he just fed it to his dog. So this is marginal utility. Basically, the total amount of satisfaction was he was really satisfied with that first burger. But as he ate more and more of the burgers, you know, the ninth burger, he said, I can't even eat. This is terrible. I need to just feed this to my dog. He was so full. So this is the principle of diminishing marginal utility. And it's important that we know this, you know, and especially when we're selling things. When prices dropped to a quarter of a burger, he was willing to consume more. He says, man, I can get a good deal. Let me get some more since they're only a quarter, right? Then as that diminished, you know, from a quarter, finally they had no value to him anymore, right? So that is a diminishing marginal utility. So that is that basic laws of demand when we're talking about demand. And so figure A going to illustrate the marginal utility. Let's go to that figure A here. Where is that figure? On the next page. Okay, right here. This is the schedule. So you'll see here. Number of cheeseburgers, you know, marginal utility in unit 20 units. Okay, so we have, as these cheeseburgers go down, you know, buying these cheeseburgers in units as you go, and you'll see the marginal utility in units and total utility in units. And so this is kind of the schedule here. 20 units, you know, a number of cheeseburger, about 2 of them. Marginal utility in units is 19, total units is 39. So you see the burger gave Matt the most utility or satisfaction, represented by 20 units, means he had the most satisfaction. The second burger was almost as valuable, gave him 19 units of the satisfaction. And each additional burger, less and less units of satisfaction, right? As he went down. And then as you can see, it says the value as the first one had been, it gave him 19 units of marginal utility, but his total utility jumped to 39, 20 and 19. So basically 20 and 19, 39, see has the total, as you do the total utility in units, you can see how it reacts there. And this is all about the burgers, you know, so as you go. And this is the schedule. It's a principle. Let's see. The principle of law, and you get to that negative. The negative utility would be at that point where it became a negative to have one, right? So you can see how that schedule goes. Now let's look at the total utility curve. So that's important that we know that total utility curve there. So if we look here, the principle of diminishing utility is useful in explaining why individuals make choices that they do. While Matt was willing to pay the restaurant's asking price for the first 6 burgers, he chose not to buy any more, even though his appetite was not completely satisfied. When the price of cheeseburger dropped to a quarter, he was willing to consume more, but the 9th cheeseburger ended up having no personal value. So here we have this curve. So you can see the utility curve is how he liked it. So this is the total utility. That's how much useful that it was to him. And this is the quantity of cheeseburgers names, each one. And you see how he wanted, oh yeah, that satisfied utility as it went up. But it got to that point where it just diminished because he didn't want any more, right? So that's kind of like the curve that you would see on there. So you can see now. So this is the schedule in some way, and the units being how useful that object is to them. So let's go on. The basic law of demand. So we're still talking about that law of demand. It's easy to train economics just to teach a parrot to say supply and demand, supply and demand, supply and demand. Yes. It's so important that economists know about supply and demand. It says one of the most important principles of economics is the fundamental law of demand, which explains the inverse relationship between the price of the good and the amount of people would choose. The law states this: other things remaining equal, as the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases in a free market system. So this is demand. So as you're going to buy some shoes, as you want to buy the shoes, you say, man, the shoes are a pretty good price here, you know? I'm going to get them for $50, that's a good deal. But as the price goes up to $150, you think, oh man, those shoes are not worth $150. I can't pay $150 for those shoes. So as the demand goes up, you know, as the price goes up, as the price go up, the demand goes down because you don't want to pay so much for it. So that's just what they're talking about. These are the fundamental laws of demand. It's an inverse relationship because inverse means opposite. So as the price of something is going up, then people don't want to buy it because they want to get a good deal, right? If the price is too high, they're not going to want to buy it. You're not going to say, oh, I want to pay a high price for something. So the law again states, other things remaining equal as the price of a good increases, the quantity demanded decreases in a free market. Conversely, if the price of the good falls as things get cheaper, the quantity is demanded more as things get cheaper. Oh man, we're all getting a good deal. Let's all run there on Black Friday, right? Because the price is falling. So you can see how it's an inverse relationship, and the inverse relationship means opposite. Like as one falls, one goes up, right? In other words, the higher the price of a good climbs, the less the people will want to buy that product. The lower the price of the good, then the more people want to buy it. In order to know the demand for an item is high or low, we must be able to show the amount bought in a length of time. So how do we find? If we know, okay, man, 1,000 gallons of ice cream at this price, okay, that's pretty good, but is it over a day? Is it over a month? Is it over a year? So we have to graph that out. All has to go by time. So right here it says, so it's 1,000 gallons of ice cream. You have to know the time period. So income and substitution effects. Some things affect our demand, right? Income. So explain why a change in price affects demand. So a change in price would affect demand. What makes the prices change? Well, first of all, it's the income effect right here. The income effect basically says if a price of a good falls, consumers tend to buy more. Lower prices expand the buying power. So if the price is lower, they'll buy more. And the opposite. That's what we've been talking about, is this income effect. But we also have another thing called the substitution effect. So what's the substitution effect here? The substitution effect indicates that people tend to substitute less expensive goods for ones of higher prices. And that explains why expenses may not increase when a price increases. People decide to find some other good to substitute. So substitution effect indicates that people tend to substitute less expensive goods, right? So they may still buy more expensive item, but only as long as the item has value to them. When they can find something, a substitute that's less expensive, then that object's not going to have value anymore. An example they gave about playing golf, you know. Some people enjoy golf so much that they will cut the consumption of other goods rather than give up their sport of the price increases. So basically saying golf is starting to increase, they're going to have to pay a lot more to play golf. But because they love golf so much, they'll probably pay the price because they're addicted to golf, right? So, but for every one, there is a point at which the price becomes the decisive consideration, the point at which a consumer alters his economic behavior. So there's just a point when the prices come so high they really can't afford it, they're not going to do it, whether it's golf or anything else. So the demand curve. The demand curve and the demand schedule. Those are two things. And remember, we kind of went over the schedule and the curve in the last on the last page. But let's talk about, they're talking about a bicycle manufacturer, Mr. Mendoza from San Antonio, Texas. He wants to start a market in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. So he wants to know what the demand for mountain bikes are there. So he goes to get some help. He goes to economists, and to figure out a demand schedule and a demand curve, so we can see what the demand for the bikes are. So here is a demand schedule here. So you see here, basically, you know, there's the quantity demanded per of bicycles per year. So when the price is that they set the price there at $1,000, they said at $1,000, the 5,000 bicycles were sold. But when they decreased the price to $950, $7,000 bikes were sold. Then at $900, 10,000 bikes were sold. $850, 14,000, and at $800, 20,000 bikes were sold. So it's important. He's wanting to know this demand schedule. So the demand schedule is a list of numbers that compare with the prices and the quantity demanded. And this is a certain per year in a certain time period. And so then they want to make this into a curve like this, so they can see it on a graph. So when a merchant sees it on a graph, they can say, oh, this is the way it goes. They can see, their eyes can see this demand schedule being the list of numbers now goes into the demand curve. And so a demand curve, which is a graphic representative of the quantity of goods purchased at different prices. The demand for bicycles illustrated in the entire curve. Not just one point on that curve, but this entire curve now is telling you how the price is going to be. So the demand curve always slopes down to the right, right? Because it's always inverse. Whenever you have a direct relationship, you're going to have a line going this way, like my pencil is. When you have an indirect, that means as one goes up, the other goes down, you're going to have the line's always going to slope. That's a demand curve always is going to slope this way. So just to let you know. So the graph represents the quantity of goods purchased at different prices there. And of course, this is an inverse relationship going from the top to the bottom, higher to lower on the quantity there. And so you can see the demand curve graph shows the price falls. As the price falls, the quantity demanded increases. So it's opposite. As one falls, the other increases. So the changes in demand, all factors remain the same, means that other things are equal. There's another word for that here. Let's look up here, I'll show you. It says changes in demands. The bicycle demand data assumes that all other factors remain constant during the entire time. So this is what economics mean by other things being equal. So that means we can go by this curve by just price, right? The price and the demand, but now nothing else influence. There's a lot of different things that can influence demand, we're going to find out. But other things being equal, and this Latin framing means ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus, meaning all things are equal. However, there are many factors that can influence the demand of a product. So let's look at these factors. So here's the picture of our regular demand curve going this way. Now it's going to be able to, the whole curve will either go to the right, an increased demand, or go to the left with a decreased demand. And that's when another factor comes in. So you can see how the whole curve changes. And what changes the whole curve to right or left? So a shift right means an increase in demand. A shift left is going to mean a decrease in demand of the whole curve. Now we're not just talking about prices. Now we're going to talk about other things that may affect whether people want or demand to buy an object. So there are actually 5 key factors. And I'm going to go over these factors and then we'll finish with this video and do the supply in the next. But here we have tastes and preferences, number 1. Tastes and preferences, 5 key. The entire curve will move right or left because of these 5 factors. So tastes and preferences are the attitudes that about the product. So if someone knows, oh, it's summer. In the summer and winter months affect the sales. People want to ride bikes when? In the summer. So that the taste and the preferences of buying bikes in the summer is important. Or say that a newspaper writes a negative article about the bicycles and said they're not good bicycles. Well, then it's going to shift left. For sure it's going to shift left because it's going to realize it's a shifting left if it had a negative, response, instead of 5 stars it has 1 star, inferior, then that taste and preferences will affect. And this will affect how many people are going to be buying are going to be demanding and buying a good. So the next would be the income. People buy more when the incomes rise. So when people have more money, they tend to buy more. And they buy less when they don't. A normal good, it talks about a normal good. Let's go down here and talk about the income. Income, a good whose demand is directly related to the consumers is called a normal good. A normal good means as people get more money, have more money, some things they buy more, like they buy new cars and they buy vacations and airline tickets. They buy steaks, instead because they have more money to buy. That's a normal good. But also we have inferior goods. And what are inferior goods? They are those things when people don't have so much money that they substitute these inferior goods. Like, they buy beans instead of steak. They buy used cars instead of new cars. They decide to take the bus instead of take the airplane. Those are more inferior goods. So normal goods are those goods that when the price goes, when people get more money, normal goods are those goods that we buy because we have more money. Inferior goods is when we don't have very much money, then we have to buy less expensive things and we have to rent instead of buy a house or stuff like that. So let's go about, that's the second factor. Let's go into population. Population growth or shift in age structure can also affect the goods. Okay, that would be really much with bicycles. So if you have a whole bunch of young families moving in that have a lot of kids and teenagers and young adults, they're going to buy bicycles more than older people, right? So the population growth and the shift in the population growth will actually change whether people are going to buy their product or not. So it would shift. If they have more, it's going to increase in demand. When they have less, say that all the young people move out and just older people are left, then they'd have less, So population is important, especially of a certain age group. And then number 4 is the prices of related goods. So this is kind of the related goods, which may either be substitutes, a good capable of being used in place, or complements. So we know what a substitute is, really. So if you have a substitute, you have a good that's being used in place of another good. That's a substitute. So if you have a lot of substitutes, say that you have substitutes for bicycles, so suddenly there's a whole bunch of mini bikes available or motorcycles available, and everybody wants a motorcycle instead. That's a substitute. We also have complements. Complements are goods that are used in conjunction with another. Like, let's say, complements would be the cost of bicycle gear. So you're going to buy a bicycle, but then now you have to buy all the gear. And then all of a sudden the gear becomes really expensive. A bicycle helmet gets really high, and you have to buy all this gear that's required for a bicycle. So then now it's going to be a higher price. So if the complement is high priced, then the demand's going to go down, because I think, man, I'd buy a bicycle, but now I have to buy all this gear. Or I'll buy a motorcycle, but now I have to buy all this motorcycle boots and gear and helmet and everything, which is going to cost me a lot of money. So that affects the price of goods, is the complement. That means the gear or the substitute. There's a substitute for it. So on to the last, which is probably one of the main things, is the consumer expectations. So the demand for a product is often influenced by consumers' expectation of what will happen in the future. Well, I wouldn't say this is a major because a lot of people don't think about the future too often. But what will happen in the future? Say the news says that, oh, the prices of aluminum and titanium are going up. And everybody says, oh man, we better get out there and buy some bicycles because they're going to get a really high price. Or the factory is going to be laid off and everybody's not going to have the money there. So the factors, then people want to save money, so they've decided they're not going to buy bicycles. So they'll basically, if you know that you're going to lose your job, you're not going to buy a bicycle, right? So you're going to buy something else. So, and on to this last part, which is really important. It says, be careful not to confuse the change in demand with the change in quantity demanded. So that means, the change in demand are these 5 factors. And that's when you have the whole change in demand going, the whole curve changing. That's the change in demand. But the change in quantity demand just goes by price. And it means you have a point. It goes by point by point. The change in quantity demanded represent any specific point along the demand curve. And that's influenced by price and price alone. So one point to another point on this fixed curve would be price. The only factor that can cause a change in quantity demanded is an increase or decrease in price. So that's just saying, you look at this curve and you say, okay, this price at this point, let's see, 850 at this, let's say 900 at, if I at 10, quantity demanded 10 by 10 at, and you say at 900, that would be the price, so that you know that that's the exact point. So that's the quantity demanded. Now, when the change in demand, the whole change in demand changes, it's not really affected so much by price anymore because you already have the price numbers, but it's affected by other factors, the whole curve. That represents the whole curve changing, just to know that. And you'll find the same thing when we talk about supply, but it's important that you know that the change in quantity demanded is an increase or decrease in the price alone. And so figure F illustrates the difference between these 2 types of change. So let's look at figure F right there. You can see the 2 types. Decrease in quantity demanded. These are these points right here. Decrease, here's 1 point, here's another point. This is the decrease in quantity demanded on these points here. And this is the increase in demand, is the whole kit and caboodle changing, moving over. So when you have points like that, that's the quantity. When you have just the whole section, that is the change in demand, not the quantity. Okay? So let's stop there.